My name is Kenneth Pelletier. We're going to be looking at the epigenetics of longevity. Next. The first study that looked at the epigenetic influences on gene expression was conducted by Dr. Bert Vogelstein at Johns Hopkins, very eminent researcher. And he focused on 24 major diseases over 15 years. So if one twin had a disease, what's the likelihood the other twin would? And he found that Parkinson's risk was 5%, coronary heart disease was 50%, or random chance, and most cancers were less than 50%. And in the last point, the sequencing can be misleading since each twin remains susceptible to all of the other diseases and not necessarily the same disease as the twin. So it showed how something other than the genetic predisposition was at work. Next. And what in our research here at UCSF, we're really focusing on the telomeres and aging. The telomere length is one of the most critical biomarkers for human aging. Any living organism, the result is a decrease when the telomere is disrupted, is a decrease in the number and function of cells. Every time a cell replicates, telomeres shorten until they reach a point where the cells can no longer divide properly. The last point, telomere length is a crucial biomarker providing insight at understanding organismal aging. Next. Now, in the telomere theory of aging, let's skip to the last point. Shortening of the telomeres has been shown to be associated with increased mortality rate from age-related diseases. Individuals with shorter telomeres had a mortality twice that of those with longer telomeres. Most important thing here is that the telomere length is modifiable, in which we will now see. Okay, next. One of the applications of this, practical applications, has been in the prediction of Alzheimer's. And what we have found was a study that was conducted looking at the mass spectrometry to measure amyloid beta and amyloid beta 40. And under PET scan, the blood basically predicts 88% accuracy of onset of Alzheimer's. When you add ApoE4, a genetic marker, and age over age 65, then it raises the accuracy of the blood test to 94%. So again, adding in these epigenetic markers is critical in Alzheimer's detection. Next. So this is, our group is under the direction of Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the telomere in 2009. Next. This electron microscopy of a telomere, the length of the telomere strand or the chromosome governs is a marker of extended aging, and the tips, how intact they are, again, is a measure of the likelihood of a long life expectancy. Next. So we see on the left the chromosome tips without telomerase, or the functional part of telomere, is that it is reduced from generation to generation until finally at the bottom, you see information is lost. The cell is no longer replicating accurately, and what we call aging and subsequent death. On the right, you see with telomerase, the tips are preserved and the replication is accurate, and you have a longer life expectancy. Next. This is my favorite. This is the longest lived individual. She died about 3 years ago, Jeanne Calumet. In Paris she died at the age of 123 and some odd days. You can see her smoking, and it's when she was asked to what does she attribute her long life, she said good brandy, young men, and Gauloises, which are these disgusting little French cigarettes, but they're like little cigars. She doesn't inhale, she puffed on them, and it's common to see long-lived cultures actually smoking locally grown tobacco without all the tobacco byproducts. Next. This is her induction into the Guinness Book of Records at age 100, I think it was 121, 2 years before her death at 123. She was quite a character. Next. Now, this is the graying of planet Earth. We look over at 2030. What we see is that developing countries are where we're going to see the greatest increase in life expectancy, up to 80 plus, even reaching up to 100. If If you look on the right hand, the far left green are for men in developing countries. On the far right, the kind of orange color is for women. So you can see that the countries, undeveloped or underdeveloped countries, are experiencing the greatest increase in life expectancy on the planet. Next. And by 2050, we will have people, nearly 1 billion individuals over the age of 100 by 2050, right around the corner. Next. So these are familiar images of the impact of stress and with genetic predisposition with Barack Obama, Abraham Lincoln, Bill Clinton, and George Bush. You can just see the weight of the office over 8 years on these individuals. Next. And in the centenarians, you see the very last bullet point, the projected biological limit of 115 years old. Well, clearly, Jean Calumet at 123 broke that biological limit, and 120 has been considered a totem or the absolute upper limit for human life expectancy. It's called the Hayflick limit. It was developed by Leonard Hayflick at UC Berkeley. And he did an experiment of cells dividing under optimal conditions and found that if you extracted that to human life expectancy, it was 120, and it became known as the Hayflick limit. There's research now on senolytic pharmacologicals and other methods that indicate it is definitely possible to exceed 120, and more an upper limit may be in fact 150. Next. So these are the divine dozen. These are the last two PowerPoints looking at the characteristics of the blue zones. What are the 12 factors that are in common? They all have a modified Mediterranean diet, fish, but little or no red meat. They do have smoking, non-processed tobacco, physical activity. They're farmers. There's daily farming. They don't have a gymnasium or personal trainer. They have strong psychosocial bonds. No person is an island. Everyone lives in a community. The next to the last, old age is respected. In our culture, we tend to scrap heap people at 65 or 70. In this case, they make critical decisions on finance, on marriage, on many, many activities. So they're seen to be repositories of wisdom. They're sexually active. When you're with them, they're touching, they're hugging, and they do express sexual intercourse into their 80s and 90s. Next. They have no fear of death. James Fries at Stanford called the squaring of the curve, which is the longer a person lives, the older they are, the more rapidly they die. And they don't focus on death. They focus on they don't want to be a burden, and very often they will tell a family, let's celebrate this weekend, I won't be with you on Monday. They know they're going to die. Alcohol consumption, it's more than moderate than in our culture, but they consume it throughout the day and with meals. Their environment is clean, it's organic, little or no toxin or pollutions. They have appropriate primary medical care. This is a critical factor that's often overlooked. They include alternative therapies, herbals in their pharmacopoeia. Clearly, there are genetic and epigenetic influences. And last, they all have a philosophy of life. They may or may not have a traditional religion, but they all have a sense of life that has a purpose and a universe that has a purpose. And that's a critical variable, I think, that determines their extreme life expectancy. Next. I like this one. So Harwell was born in 1914. He gave up smoking, gave up booze, gave up red meat, and he died anyway. So I think the last factor, they do not fear death. They live life fully and well. And it's a great lesson for all of us from the epigenetics of longevity. I think next. So if you want more details on this, on the long-lived cultures and on longevity in general, it's covered in my book, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life, or online at drpelletier.com. So thank you, and I hope this has been helpful.